California families lost everything. Homes gone, businesses gone, entire neighborhoods reduced to ash. Then came the promises. Politicians promised help, charities promised help, celebrities promised help, fundraisers promised help. Over $100 million was raised. Federal aid was approved, state agencies announced recovery programs, yet thousands of Californians are still waiting. Tonight, we're following the money, separating the headlines from realities and asking a simple question. If all this money exists, why are wildfire victims still struggling to rebuild their lives?
From Seattle to Los Angeles, this is Left Coast News. No apologies, just the truth.
Welcome back to Left Coast News. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know we've covered this story before. Not California wildfires specifically, but the same pattern. We recently covered Washington state flood victims who were promised relief only to discover that most of the money remained trapped behind eligibility requirements and bureaucracy. Now we're seeing a very similar story playing out in California. Different disaster, different government, different agencies, same outcome. People who suffered catastrophic losses are still waiting while officials explain why the money isn't reaching them. Tonight, we're going to break down two separate controversies. First, the FireAid charity investigation. Second, the massive backlog of government disaster assistance. And finally, we'll talk about a little-known California fund that many victims assume exists to help them, but actually serves a very different purpose. The FireAid promise. Following the devastating Southern California wildfires, FireAid organized one of the largest celebrity fundraising efforts in recent memory. The event generated enormous public support. Millions of Americans donated because they believed they were helping wildfire victims rebuild their lives. The total raised approximately $100 million. Now, if you're an average donor sitting at home, you probably assume that means victims receive direct assistance, temporary housing, food, building materials, financial support. The things people actually need after losing everything. But congressional investigators began asking questions about where that money ultimately went. According to reports released during the investigation, roughly $75 million was distributed to nearly 200 separate nonprofit organizations and NGOs. That immediately raises a question. If the goal was helping fire victims, why are there nearly 200 middlemen involved? Every layer added between donors and victims creates opportunities for administrative costs, mission creep, and spending priorities that may not align with what donors thought they were supporting. Investigators allege some funding went toward advocacy organizations, voter registration efforts, administrative overhead, and media-related projects. Now, to be fair, supporters argue these organizations provide community support and recovery services. But that's not what many donors believed they were funding. Most people donating after a disaster think they're helping families rebuild homes, not funding organizational infrastructure, not funding advocacy efforts, not funding public awareness campaigns. The controversy isn't simply where the money went. It's whether donors were given a clear picture of where it would go before they opened their wallets. The California Volunteers questions. The investigation expanded into questions involving the California Volunteers Fund. This organization operates closely with Governor Gavin Newsom's administration. Investigators sought answers regarding potential connections and transparency surrounding relief fund distributions. The organization has denied receiving certain grants under scrutiny, but the broader issue remains. When government-connected organizations become involved in disaster relief funding, transparency becomes critical, because public trust depends on people believing money is actually reaching those who it was intended to help. And right now, many Californians aren't convinced. The government bottleneck. But the charity controversy is only half the story. The second issue may be even more frustrating. Government relief funding exists. In many cases, it has already been approved. Yet thousands of families still can't access it. Current estimates show nearly 30,000 Californian households remain trapped in various stages of disaster recovery delays. Think about that for a moment. These aren't statistics, these are real families. Many have been displaced for months. Some have exhausted savings. Others are navigating insurance disputes while trying to find temporary housing in one of the most expensive states in America. And while they wait, government agencies continue processing paperwork, federal approvals, environmental reviews, compliance requirements, eligibility determinations, additional reviews, supplemental reviews, reviews of the reviews. Because apparently losing your home isn't enough. First, you must survive the bureaucratic obstacle course. Reports indicate only a small fraction of approved recovery funding has actually reached projects intended to rebuild communities. Shocking. Schools, infrastructure, water systems, housing. The money exists on paper. The real communities need it in reality. Those are two very different things. Everyone blames someone else. The state points toward federal delays, federal agencies point toward review requirements, insurance companies point toward claims processing, local governments point toward state and federal rules. Meanwhile, victims are stuck in the middle. Everyone has an explanation. Nobody seems to have a solution. And this is where public frustration explodes. Because average Americans don't care which agency form is sitting on which desk. They just want the help they were promised. The Wildfire Fund most people misunderstand. Then we arrive at another source of confusion, the California Wildfire Fund. Many people hear that California has a multi-billion-dollar wildfire fund and naturally assume it's there to help disaster victims. But that is not its primary purpose. The fund was established under AB 1054. Its purpose is largely to stabilize the utility industry and prevent utility bankruptcies following catastrophic wildfire liability claims. In practice, the fund helps reimburse utilities after settlements are reached. So you're paying for that too. That's a very different mission than writing direct relief checks to displaced families. Again, this isn't necessarily hidden, it's in the law. But many Californians understandably assume a wildfire fund exists for wildfire victims. The reality is considerably more complicated. This story highlights a problem that extends far beyond California. Americans are increasingly losing faith in institutions because they keep hearing the same promises, followed by the same results. Money gets raised, press conferences happen, officials announce programs, celebrities hold concerts, politicians take a victory lap, and then months later, the victims are still asking where the help went. That's a recipe for public distrust, whether it's Washington flood victims, California wildfire victims, or any future disaster. The public expectation is simple. If money is raised for victims, then the victims should benefit. If government approves disaster relief, relief should arrive before people lose everything waiting for it. That shouldn't be a controversial standard. California wildfire victims deserve answers. Donors deserve transparency. Taxpayers deserve accountability. And families who lost homes deserve more than another explanation about why the system isn't working. Because at some point, good intentions stop mattering. Results are what count. And right now, thousands of Californians are still waiting for them. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. Should disaster relief money go directly to victims whenever possible? Do charities and government agencies provide enough transparency about where disaster funding actually goes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this report valuable, make sure you subscribe and follow Left Coast News and Behind the Line. You can also find us on YouTube, Rumble, Brady-on, BitChute, Facebook, X, True Social, Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Share this episode with friends and family. And if you have firsthand experience dealing with disaster relief programs, insurance claims, or government recovery efforts, leave a comment. Your insight helps others understand what's really happening on the ground.